Sounds good.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Undergraduate Research Education Series. Welcome back if you've been to any of these events before. My name is Shiver. I'm an academic program manager in the Office of Undergraduate Research. And I will be starting us off with some housekeeping, land acknowledgement, and then I will also be kind of staffing the chat. And so, you can either unmute yourself and ask questions or participate, or you can put it in the chat and then I will read it out to Dean as we go on. So you can kind of choose how you engage. To start, the most important way to start is this land acknowledgement. The American Indian Resource Center leads the way for me to acknowledge that the land that the University of Utah resides on has always been on Indigenous lands, specifically on the lands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. And I encourage you all to think about the Indigenous peoples of whatever land you're on today, if you're not also in Salt Lake City. It's imperative that we acknowledge the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Through this land acknowledgement, I want to express my personal gratitude and appreciation for their persevering to protect this land for future generations. The erasure of this relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands is an insidious form of ongoing colonization, and we need to build our mindfulness of this and of other Indigenous protocols. And of course, this land acknowledgement means nothing if we don't also get the land back. Okay, much more boring housekeeping. If you have logged into this Zoom call in real time, your attendance is already taken care of. You do not have to fill out a form. If you are watching this recorded video later, please do go to the top of the Education Series page and fill out the Undergraduate Research Education Series evaluation form with your unit. That is how I will know that you watched the video and can check it off for your URUP attendance requirement. I will drop a link to that evaluation in the chat for those in real-time live Zoom call. But again, that's optional for you all. Your attendance is already taken care of. Okay, and with all of that, we have Dean McGovern here from the Bennion Center to talk to us about community-based research, what it is, some ways to think about doing it, some, I'm gonna do a terrible job describing it. So Dean, take it away.
Thanks, Shiver. I appreciate you and I appreciate everyone for being here today. I apologize for being the one that couldn't get in technologically, so I'm sorry for the delay. Thanks for your patience. My name's Dean McGovern. I get to work at the Bennion Center. We are the community engagement hub or center on campus. We get faculty and students involved in community projects all across the valley, all across Utah, Western United States, and also internationally. We have a couple of community engaged learning abroad courses that we do. I want to start with taking us to a wonderful river. This one happens to be in Montana, but there are plenty of beautiful rivers in Utah that we could gather at. And if we were to gather at this river, and I'm going to start with this bit of an allegory, where we're having this nice picnic on the shores of on the banks of this river, and we're throwing a frisbee around and having a good time, grilling up good food and enjoying each other's company in the sunshine and the great outdoors. When one of us notices that there's some children who are struggling coming down the river in the water. And, that's alarming. We've got to get them out. We've got to make sure they're safe. And so one of us jumps in and, starts taking these kids out of the water and getting them to the shore for safety. And we realize quickly that there are more and more of these kids, these young kids coming down the river unprepared and not able to save themselves. So we're having to get them out. We're overwhelmed with how many keep coming down the river. And we quickly realize that we can't get them out fast enough. We need to buy ourselves more time. So a few of us jump in and we start showing the kids how to tread water. We show them through, to use their arms and legs to keep their heads above the water so that they can stay as safe as possible until someone can come and help them get out, or they can get themselves out. So that ends up being part of the solution. But as more and more kids keep coming down, and as some of us on the shore are watching this, we say, what is going on? Why is this keep happening? And so we'll walk up shore to find the source or the systems or the problems that society has placed for these kids that are allowing them to get into the water and into harm's way and into danger in the first place. Like, what is going on? What is happening that, sure, we can pull kids out of the water. Sure, we can show them how to swim or tread water, but why does this problem persist? Why does it keep happening? And so we walk upstream to kind of figure that out and investigate. And maybe it's a system problem. Maybe it's policies. Maybe there's a hole in a fence somewhere that should be fixed. Maybe the river goes by a playground and it's an attractive nuisance and kids are just, walking in, or what is happening? And so we seek out those things too. As these kids keep coming down, we recognize we need more help. The small group of us that were picnicking is not enough. We need to go beyond the trees, into the next town and let people know of this problem. We have to spread the word that more people are needed to help out. We also need resources. We need food, we need more towels, we need equipment to help get these kids out of the water. So we need to raise money to address this issue. We need to check in with the legislature and see what systems and laws are in place that allow this to happen, see if we can't change those. And these are all what I'm describing on this crude, somewhat morbid example, are all the ways in which we can engage with this community problem if we choose to take it on as a community problem. And what we call at the Bennion Center, we call those the pathways of community engagement. There's the activism and getting involved, also getting other people involved. There's the data collection, community-based research, which we're going to talk about today. There's the direct service of jumping in the river and pulling kids out. There's the philanthropy or raising money or resources that might help to address this problem. There's the policy and the politics of figuring out, what allows these problems to persist. And then perhaps there's social entrepreneurship. Maybe there's companies or organizations that we can recruit to develop products or services that might help solve this problem, or invest capital into solving the problem in social entrepreneurial ways. These are all the ways that we try to engage students and faculty at the university to solve issues that they care about. And the one we want to focus on today is this idea of community-based research, collecting the data, working with the community, collecting the data and developing the understanding so that we can address and change issues that are problems, develop our community assets, and generally make the world more beautiful, more safe, more just, more equitable. So what is this thing, community-based research? It can be called community-engaged research, community-engaged scholarship, participatory research. Sometimes it's called action science. Whatever approach, whatever title you give it, we like to call it community-based research. Whatever approach, it's definitely a commitment to exploration and understanding and new knowledge, but also implementing solutions to community issues. So that is a really important element that you don't always find in undergraduate research or any research, that we want to implement solutions. Often university research is criticized for being a way to, sure, we're generating new knowledge, but are we implementing solutions that affect real people? Or are we creating research papers and dissertations and master's theses that sit on a shelf and help nobody? Community-based research obviously doesn't do that. A friend of mine at the University of Pennsylvania, a colleague, Ira Harkavy, is fond of saying that as academics, as socially conscious and community-minded and equity and justice-minded academics, it is not enough for us to predict the rain. We must also help build the ark. Sorry to use a biblical reference there, but that's what Ira used, and I always swipe it from him because I love it so much. It's very telling. We have a lot of academics, faculty, students who love to develop, to collect data, analyze it, and develop it. But if we don't put that to use in some instances, then we're really missing a huge part of our calling. It is not enough, as Ira says, to predict the rain. That's great science. We can do that. But we also then need to help build the ark to protect the people, the animals, the environment, the neighborhood that sustain us. So community-based research has several definitions. I tend to like this one. It's basically a partnership approach to research or study that equitably involves community members, agency representatives, and traditional academics. And by traditional academics, we mean faculty that have studied this for years, and we mean students who are just getting into it. Undergraduate research is a very, very important part of this enterprise, and we consider undergraduate researchers to be those academics that partner with community members and agency representatives. And they're part of all aspects of the process of collecting the data, analyzing the data, disseminating the results and findings. And everyone contributes expertise to this project. It's shared decision-making and ownership of the project. And that's a really important component of what we call community-based research, that it's not always and singularly faculty-led. It is co-owned, mutually beneficial. There is expertise all over the place, not just in the ivy-covered walls of academia and up on the hill here at the University of Utah. There are plenty of experts in the community on what's happening in the community. And we need to put aside our egos and ask, and not only ask, but ask them to partner with us in our search for discovery. So why would someone engage in community-based research as opposed to other types of research? Maybe a nonprofit wants to evaluate its programs. That's one reason that you might be asked to engage in community-based research or be part of it. Maybe the YMCA wants to find out why certain populations are not utilizing a number of their programs. Maybe the road home wants to know, well, what are the busiest times of day and need to collect data on that, or parking issues or childcare issues. They want to evaluate their programs, they need data, so they need research done to help them solve their problems. An advocacy group might need data to support their campaign for some environmental project or some new school development, or whatever the campaign might be. They might need data to support what they're trying to get done. A scientist might want to communicate with the public about data that they have uncovered, and they need community partners to help do that. So they bring in the community partners early, not just when the study is finished, but at the beginning to conduct community-based research. A professor wants to develop an experiential learning opportunity for their students. So they'll connect with a community partner. Community partner will have students come to the organization and help out achieving their mission, and collect data on that particular experience, not only the student experience, but what's going on at the organization. A government agency might need researchers to engage in neighborhood planning process. A lot of urban research of where train stations should be and bus stops is ongoing data collection and research that's needed and necessary. And a student wants to make a difference in society. A student comes to the university, obviously seeking a degree and lots of educational experiences. They want to make a difference in society, so they engage themselves in a community-based research project on either climate or equity or justice or education or health or language acquisition and the ways that indigenous languages are quickly disappearing from the face of the earth and not being captured and archived. Identity and politics, these are all areas that require and can benefit from community-based research that students might find themselves engaged in. So who does it? You do it. Anyone can do it. It can be from any major: engineering, nursing, social work, philosophy, English, linguistics, communication, you name it. Anyone can do community-based research. All it takes is the desire to make a difference and be part of the solutions, and an inquisitive and curious mind that you want to collect data and analyze it and understand something in a deeper level or more broad level. So the principles, the general principles of community-based research. These were put together by a collective, a bunch of faculty members, some students, a bunch of community members, and folks who are professionals at community agencies, who came up with 6 principles at the University of Utah for community-based research. First is a set of shared goals and values. I think this is critically important. It is community-based research is driven by the goals and values that are explicitly shared among partners. So in order for them to be explicit, we need to talk about them. We need to discuss them. And so we bring partners together, whether you're academic or you work in a community agency, or you're a nurse, or you're a teacher, or you're a politician, or work in a government agency. What is it that we want to accomplish? What are our goals and our values around this? Next is community strengths. Community-based research builds on the strengths and assets and knowledge and cultures that currently exist in the community right now. So rather than a deficit-based sort of problem-solving approach, which is a fine approach to research, but we also like to recognize what are the assets that exist in a community. What are the strengths that this community is founded on and is foundational to this community, and we put those out front and center. We also believe in equitable collaboration. Partners share power. It's not just high-powered faculty members and scholars who are well-published who can only take the lead on these things. We need to share power and work together in a collaborative fashion to develop and carry out the community-based research. Very, very important. There is a hierarchy that has been created in society that somehow higher ed, maybe it's in the name higher ed, but colleges and universities enjoy a privilege that they need to share when it comes to community-based research. So thinking about equitable collaboration, sharing the workload, sharing the credit, sharing the data, all of that. And going alongside of that is the next principle, which is collective benefit. All partners should see benefits from the process and the outcomes of the community-based research. Everybody, it has to be mutually beneficial, all parties concerned. And I think that's really important between faculty and students as well. You want to build trusting relationships. Community-based research, good community-based research, successful community-based research requires open, trusting, ongoing relationships. So relationship building becomes a key part of the research process. You're not just step by step through the scientific method, which is fabulously well tested, and I would never poo-poo the scientific method, but this added component of building relationships is very, very important to the success of community-based research. And having discussions about when toes are stepped down and feelings are hurt, or something goes wrong, you have to take time out to discuss that, allow that to be discussed and resolved. And then finally, the last principle, last but not least, the results that come from the research need to be accessible. They have to be shared in ways that are accessible and useful to all partners and all affected. So it's not enough, as I stated, and as my colleague Ira stated, it's not enough to predict the rain, you have to help build the ark. So to do that, you have to make the results accessible. So if you're doing a study on education, the teachers and the students and the parents and the families that are affected by that research and by that data, we should be sharing the results with them. They were maybe perhaps part of the data collection. They may have been they may have answered a survey or taken part in a focus group. Let's circle back to them and make sure that they have accessible access to the results. One of the key pieces of good community-based research is a partnership agreement. And these are the fundamental components of that. You want to go through the partnership mission, asking questions like, what are we trying to do here? What are the questions we're trying to answer by collecting this data? What's our research design? What are each partner's missions and goals? This is a very important question to ask. If I come into it, what are my personal and professional missions and goals? What is the personal and professional missions and goals of my partners? What are those? And let's talk about those. Then we'll get into the joint goals and outcomes. But first, you start with what you want to get out of it. And you got to be a little selfish there. And then you move into the partnership values. What do we all care about? And then what do we jointly want to do? So there's what you want to do, there's what I want to do, and then there's what we want to do. And that's very, very important. And that goes into the partnership agreement. You divvy up the roles and responsibilities. Who's going to do what? Who's going to make those phone calls? Who's going to bring these subjects or participants into our study? Who's going to collect these types of data? Who's going to collect these other types of data? How are we going to do the analysis? Are we going to farm that out to a statistician? Are we going to do it ourselves? Are we going to, how are the data going to be analyzed? And who's going to do it? Who's going to do the writing when we go to publish this work? And how are we going to make this accessible? Who's going to develop the website? How are we going to, when we publish this, how are we going to make sure that it's published in all the languages that are needed so it's completely accessible? Whose roles and what are the responsibilities? Where are we going to get funding? Where are we going to get support? Are we going to ask the Office for Undergraduate Research for another grant? Are we going to seek outside assistance? Are we going to get money from the Bennion Center? Are we going to get money from the government agencies that perhaps are sponsoring these? Then what's our communication plan? How are we getting this? How are we getting the word out that the study is happening? Who's going to be our media consultant and talk to the press when they come snooping around and asking about how we're doing? How are those roles divided and what's our plan for that? And then finally, when we roll this out, how is authorship, which is a big deal in academia, how is authorship created? Making sure that community partners receive authorship, not just the faculty members, not just the students or the academics. but that everybody that was participating in this receives credit for the work that's done, and that gets disseminated in an accessible manner. And I just wanted to share with you a few of the products of community-based research. You can probably think of a ton. I've got a few here. Maybe a study ends up with a culturally relevant facilitation tool, or a book of facilitation tools, or a website of some sort for Pacific Islander communities, so that they can have deep and meaningful conversations about very important matters like maternal and child health or something like that. But these tools might be a product of your community-based research. Your research might end up culminating in a bilingual comic book that can help families meet with school teachers in a school setting, and address issues on having discussions, meaningful discussions. You could develop through your data collection a mental health curriculum for building emotional intelligence for children. You could curate and create a museum exhibit of Muslim hijabs at a public art display or a public installation in a museum. Your data might create a city report addressing housing affordability and homelessness. These are all ways in which community-based research can be put to use in a very practical way and create products that are useful and accessible to the community. And I think I am finished with my remarks, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you have regarding anything I said.
While folks are thinking and typing stuff in the chat, I have a question that we can start off with.
Oh, of course.
I also have a million more, so don't worry. I'll get out of this session early. It'll just be the Shiver show if you don't ask your own. So earlier, a couple of slides back, you had said something about deficit versus asset-based perspectives on research. Can you tell us what those are and maybe what some of the problems with using a deficit-based approach might be?
Oh, sure. Especially going into, I'll just go back. I was talking about community strengths as one of the principles. And one of the problems that's often higher ed is very guilty of is leaning in on the problems of a community. And that's looking right at the deficits of a community. Cracked sidewalks, underfunded schools, low incomes, blighted areas like parks that haven't been cared for, that type of stuff. Dead grass, broken windows, the list goes on and on. We can all talk about the deficits of a community. The problem with that is you can, first of all, dishearten and discourage the folks in a community from wanting to participate, leading with the deficits. The flip side of that is encouraging and recognizing that every single community, every single population, every single area has assets, and we can't forget what those are when we start to build and try to make the community stronger, more resilient, more just, more healthy. That's our goal in all communities, and recognizing that there are assets to build on. There's location. There's the fact that a community is bilingual or trilingual. The fact that community has entrepreneurial people living within it. Focusing on those assets can not only generate enthusiasm for the project, it can uncover hidden gems of resources. And so it's very, very important to focus on community strengths. There's no problem with discussing deficits. I just don't think we want to dwell on them. And that's one of the principles we came up with, that you really do want to focus on a foundational level, what a community is doing well and what it has going for it. Good question.
Thank you. Another question, again, while y'all are thinking and typing things into the chat, nudge, nudge. Let's say a student is already doing a project in whatever of their respective fields. It's already kind of underway.
Mhm.
So as opposed to building a community-based research project from the get-go and formulating every one of those early steps with this in mind, how might they incorporate community-based research principles, goals, or maybe pivot their project midstream to kind of incorporate some of this important stuff?
Yeah, I like that. Well, the first thing that I would advise is being humble. Going to potential community partners in a very humble manner and not trying to push an agenda. Because ideally, these things are created together and mutually and collaboratively. But the reality is, either a community partner or an academic, a student or a faculty member, might have initiated something. So that's not uncommon, what you're describing. Often things start in the shower when you're thinking, and before too long, you've gone down the road and you haven't brought anyone along with you. And now it's come to the time where you realize, oops, I should really start bringing other people in. So I would say I would consider what community would fit. What community partners do you want to work with? What community do you want to work with, and what community partners within that community do you want to work with? Talk to perhaps other researchers who have worked in this area. One thing I always say to students is get as close to an issue as you can. Read about it, talk to people about it, listen to podcasts, read other studies, look at other products that have come out of other studies, that type of thing. Get as close to it as you can. Reflect on the experiences and the connections that you've made already in your career, even if it's a short career. Then identify existing leaders, community partners, potentials there, organizations to reach out to. I would personally, if I was a student at the university, I would reach out to undergraduate research, which all of you are part of undergraduate research, but I would reach out to the Bennion Center. And I don't mean that to blow our own horn here, but we have connections at the Bennion Center in the community. And so we can perhaps make introductions and that type of thing. So sort of make a bridge from campus to community. So I would reach out to a community engagement center here at the university. That's the Bennion Center. I would be ready to tell your story. Why is this important to you? Where did this come from? When you got this huge idea in the shower while you were on your run, or while you were playing with your kids in the park, where did it come from? How are you connected to this issue? Why did it become so important to you? And be prepared to tell that story to potential community partners. I think that would be really important. And then again, in that humble manner, talk about how you're really seeking a mutually beneficial partnership, that you aim to share everything about this and that you want to co-create it. Even having to take steps backwards in your process. I've already done these things, but I'd be willing to reconsider some of the decisions I've already made. Let's talk, that kind of thing. Just being really humble about that. Those are my suggestions.
I promised you, I have more questions. How does a community-based approach to a research project impact what the application with the institutional review board, for instance, might look like? Is there a little bit more back and forth? Are there more concerns to address up front?
Yeah, good question. That's really a good question. So the Institutional Review Board is most concerned with vulnerable populations and protecting them. So all your study will always, unless it becomes exempt for various reasons, you'll want to explain how you are protecting the subjects of your work. The principles of community-based research, IRB or institutional review boards love the principles of community-based research because we are taking our participants, or what academia has crudely called subjects for a long time, into account from the beginning. It's very, very important. It's sort of baked into the community-based research idea, principles, and design that we are careful with and protective of and sensitive to the participants of our study. The other thing IRB boards really like is that we intend to share the results from the get-go. We intend to share the results to the affected communities. That is part of it. We are aiming to, again, understand an issue better, and we're also we are seeking solutions and trying to make the world a little better for a place in the world. So IRBs love the principles of community-based research.
Speaking of making those results accessible, I know you did already give us some examples when we were back on this slide, but can you talk more about what that might look like for various kinds of projects?
The products, you mean, or the results?
Yeah, and how students could think about making whatever results they're currently working in, making those accessible to either populations they're directly working with or community more widely than members of academia.
Right. Well, I probably overstated the need to, I mean, you of course have to be intentional, but just having community partners that are interested in this work sort of make it inevitable that this was going to get shared with their populations. So for example, we had a student a few years ago do a study on IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and how it affects school children and their ability to stay engaged in a classroom while they're having to take breaks periodically and quite often to go to the bathroom, to go to the restroom. And so she did an amazing amount of data collection, and then came up with amazing results that needed to be shared. And that was done through a ton of pediatricians. And what came out of this work was a capstone project that she put together into forums for families, doctors, and students that had this in their family, this IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, in their families, where they could discuss the issues related to this. And it was an amazing success, and it all came from the data. So you could have community discussions, you could put together a pamphlet or a website, you could disseminate it in forums at the Lehigh Clinic if it were health related. I think your question was related to different subjects. So you could, this obviously the sky's the limit. I mean, we've had urban planning students doing projects on where to place bus stops and accessible curb cuts at intersections, so folks in wheelchairs can move readily up and through sidewalks and onto the street. All kinds of data collection going on there. Obviously, it results in presentations to the city, and different municipalities who are concerned about how these should be done, where these should be done, what's the most effective way to do this. And so sky's the limit on different academic areas, though. A lot of work done in elementary schools on educational practices, best practices, how often students need breaks during the day, and the importance of recess, and how many classes should be lumped together. I mean, the search for knowledge is endless.
Can we pick on the folks that are here? Can I
Oh, of course.
ask you what areas you're working in and what brought you to this session today? I'm going to call your names. Cannon, how are you feeling? What are you studying and what brought you to this session?
Yeah, so let's see, can you guys hear me? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Can hear you.
Perfect. So I'm doing research in plant and bacteria, just like genomes. And so, I mean, I like doing research in like academia, but I'm also, you know, curious about how to be involved in my community and just get to know more about that kind of stuff. So I thought this would be a great presentation to come to learn more about how I can help with the people around me.
I was part of a, I didn't collect data and I wasn't part of the study, but I was part of the planning group for a study at the University of Montana that was a bunch of soil scientists that did a lot of work, original work, and then decided to on soil for native plants, soil composition for native plants, and working with farmers, and then decided to work with farmers and ranchers across Western Montana to help them with not only their cattle, but if they had small farms on their ranch where they were trying to grow vegetables or trees or shrubs, or native plants that have been destroyed, they wanted to repopulate with native plants. So they did that. They took their basic research and turned it into a community-based research project for future studies, and they're still doing those. So lots of opportunity there.
All right, Catherine, what area are you working in and what brought you to this session today?
I apologize, I'm on a bus right now, so it might be kind of loud, but I'm just an undergrad in sociology working on going towards a master's in sociology, and I applied for the SPUR internship this summer, and I'm more interested in exactly that, impacting my society and what I can do, hopefully with teaching as well. And so, yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
All right, Jacqueline, it's your turn.
Right. Hi. So I'm an undergrad in environmental and sustainability studies, and I'm currently doing research on a historical fire with hive beetles and outbreaks in Idaho, and just counting charcoal and stuff like that. I'm really interested in not also in obviously the environment, but also I did apply to the Happiest program, which I'm pretty excited about, and hopefully get to work with the community a bit more. And I wouldn't say I'm on a one track. I'm kind of just exploring everything, just to see where I feel best fits me.
That's neat. Where in Idaho are you working?
We got our data from Mill Lake, and that's around the Sawtooth National Forest. So
Nice. And you're mostly studying burns?
yeah, so I'm currently counting charcoal in the sediment. We took out a core from the lake, just to compare that to like if there have been any like pine beetle outbreaks, and also if there's any like historical data, whether that's in archives or journals.
Right, right. Good for you.
Thank you all for participating after being called on one by one. I love hearing about what students are doing. That's like
Yeah, of course.
really helpful. Does anyone have any questions?
Is this recording going to be accessible somewhere to rewatch?
Yes, yes, we will put it up on the education series page after it finishes, what is it, converting and all of that.
Wonderful, thank you. I really appreciated this.
Well, I'm happy to help any of you anytime. And Shiver, obviously, you know where I'm at. Spread the word to anybody doing research that wants to get involved in CBR. We're always happy to help.
All right. So I'm going to drop the link to the education series evaluation form in the chat again, just for those of you who are attending in real time. If you want to fill that out, it's always helpful to us to know how things go. But again, y'all don't have to. Your attendance is already taken care of. And for anyone watching this video later for your UROP attendance requirement, please go to the education series page and fill out that evaluation with your unit. That's the only way I know that you watched the video, and then I can track your attendance.